And people in the West need to understand this. The Russians, the way they're fighting, the way they go about this operation is that they use the conflict, the military, hand in hand with diplomacy. They work together. The Russians see this as very much one helping the other. Where the West kind of, they'll do conflict, they'll do war, they'll stop the diplomacy, they'll focus on the war part of things. Then they'll stop the war, then they'll focus on the diplomacy. The Russians are working both of these at the same time, and the one helps the other, and it helps them achieve their goal. So the military operation helps them achieve the diplomacy helps the military operation move forward. And that is exactly what they're doing here. That's what they did in Syria. So as they surrounded Aleppo, they were negotiating as well with the jihadists in Aleppo. They created these humanitarian corridors, and they would evacuate civilians, and they would call ceasefires. They would call these really short time periods, short time period ceasefires. They would evacuate civilians, but they would also evacuate jihadists, the jihadists that wanted to leave. And they would give the jihadists pretty much two options, okay? Give up your weapons, leave, go home, okay? Or give up your weapons and go to Idlib. And we're going to take you to Idlib, and we're going to dump you there. So they created this type of enclave where they would dump all the jihadists there that didn't want to go home, right? They're doing the same thing in Ukraine. So take Mariupol, for example. They got the city surrounded. Now they're calling a ceasefire. They're going to create the humanitarian corridors. And the Ukraine government, the authorities have agreed to this, by the way, as well. And I'll get into that. They're going to evacuate civilians. They're going to also evacuate Ukraine military, right? They're going to give them safe passage. The Ukraine military people are going to say, you know what? I'm done with this. We've lost. I'm just going to go home to my family. They're going to do that, and they're going to go home. The Azov guys, these guys that want to fight to the death, you're going to have two types of Azov guys. Okay, you're going to have the one type of Azov guy, which is going to say, you know what? I'm out of here because I don't want to get annihilated, right? I don't want to die, but I'm going to continue the war. I'm going to continue to fight against you guys. So they're going to take that guy and they're going to dump him in the west, in the areas in and around Lviv. The other Azov guys that are going to say, you know what? I'm going to dig in and I'm going to fight here in Mariupol. This is my last stand. This is the hill that I'm going to die on. Well, that's going to be the hill that they're going to die on. So it's very much a strategy of separating the wheat from the chaff. You know, you are completing your goals when you think about it. When you go back to what the Russian military's goals were, what Putin's goals were, it was what? Demilitarization, denazification. The first part of the war was the demilitarization, right? They nullified the Air Force, they nullified the air bases, they took out the Navy, they destroyed all of the NATO infrastructure that was built up there over the 8 years. They completely demolished all of that stuff, right? They demilitarized. Then they came in and they surrounded the key cities and the key areas of Ukraine that they wanted to surround. The cauldron way that they fight, right? They surround it, they use the pincer moves, they create the cauldron, and they stay there, and they stay there. So now they've got 4 areas surrounded. You look at the map, you see 4 small or large areas now that are either cauldrons, like, you know, completely surrounded, or are about to become cauldrons. You have the east, where the Donbass, where you have the 60,000 plus or minus Ukraine military trapped in that cauldron. You have Mariupol. You have a bigger cauldron, which is the Dnieper, separating east to west of Ukraine. And now you have another cauldron, which is in the making in and around Odessa, okay? And that's going to create the land bridge, which connects Transnistria, which is a Russian enclave, which has been separated from, you could say separated from Russia proper, Russian Federation. Now that's going to be connected. They're going to finally have a land bridge there as well. So you have really 4 cauldrons pretty much that have been carved out. And all of this time while the military fighting is taking place, the Russians are negotiating with the Ukrainians. They got the Ukrainians to sit down at the table, something they could not do for 8 years. And finally, they got them to sit down and to negotiate. So they got the Ukrainians to sit down finally after 8 years and to begin the diplomacy. Something they couldn't do for 8 years. Keep that in mind. They couldn't do this for 8 years. So now they actually have diplomacy working hand in hand with the military operations. This is exactly what the Russians wanted. Man, I am telling everybody here in this video that, and even I underestimated the Russian plan. I think the Russians have executed this perfectly. I think they're getting everything they wanted. All the BS fake news that things aren't going well and things are going slowly or this and that. Maybe there were a couple of hiccups along the way. That's fine, but this is turning out exactly the way they wanted. They want this to turn out. I mean, you have to take a step back and see it. It is happening exactly the way they want this to turn out. It's really becoming clear what's taking place. And so they got the Ukrainians to sit down to engage diplomacy. They're going to be going to their 3rd and their 4th round of diplomacy. And now they're on the part where it involves creating those humanitarian corridors, okay? So they've got 4 areas now in cauldrons, the areas that matter to them, the areas that they want to capture, not conquer, not destroy, the areas that they want to capture, the areas that are majority Russian speaking, that Russians feel they have a cultural and historic tie to. Odessa, Mariupol, Kharkiv, Kiev, all these areas are areas that the Russians feel they can capture, and that they can help, that won't be problematic in the future, won't provide resistance in the future. The West, they have no connection to the West. They feel that the West was never ours to begin with. It has no Russian connection, historically, culturally, and they're going to give up on it. They're not interested in it. That's going to be, the west of Ukraine is going to be their Idlib. So going back to what I'm saying, when you take Mariupol as an example, it is the exact same thing that they were doing in Aleppo and Idlib. Safe passage to the fighters that want to go home. We're going to take the Azov guys that hate us, that want to fight us, but don't want to fight us here in Mariupol. We're going to take them and dump them in the west. And the Azov guys that decide to stay and fight to the death, well, we know what's going to happen there. So they are separating. They are denazifying now. This is the point that I'm trying to make. They already did the demilitarization. The first 8-9 days was the demilitarization. The Ukraine military is out. The NATO military in there, all the infrastructure and all the investment that NATO made is gone. Now you're seeing the denazification, and they're using the cauldrons along with diplomacy to do that. And the denazification is what? Whatever Nazis decide to stay in the cities and fight, they're gone. Whichever ones want to continue the struggle, but for a future date, well, they're going to be shipped to the west. And the regular Ukraine military, that they're just doing their job, they're just doing what they're in the military to do. They're taking their orders and fighting for their country. They're going to go home. They're going to go home. And so you're effectively separating the NAZIs from the rest of the military and the rest of the population. And those NAZIs that are going to be separated are going to be in the West. The NAZIs that are going to be allowed to stay alive, the Azov guys are going to be allowed to stay alive, are going to be in the West. The rest of them are going to be captured or dealt with. And this is how they're going to do it. And they're going to keep on hammering away at the diplomacy. Today's Mariupol, tomorrow's going to be Kharkiv, next will be Kiev, next will be Odessa, and they're going to create these humanitarian corridors, and they're going to go city by city, region by region, the East Donbass, all of it. And they're going to separate the population that they can work with, the military that they can work with and preserve, from the NAZI military. And, it's going to be really interesting what the west of Ukraine is going to look like in 3 to 6 months. And Poland, Hungary, Romania, the EU, they're going to have to figure this out, because you flooded the entire area of the West Ukraine with all kinds of weapons and guns, all kinds of of weapons have flooded into the West Ukraine. You're not going to have that area fill up with all of these Azov guys. You've released prisoners as well from the jail. Zelensky's released all these prisoners. He's given weapons to mafia people all around the cities as well. And now you have mafia turf wars. And all of these people are going to make their way to the west of Ukraine. And they're going to be a problem for the EU and for Europe. And you know that Russia's going to seal up what's going to be the border between this new entity. I don't know if it'll be called Ukraine. I don't know if it'll be called Novorossiya. I don't know. No one knows. But this new entity is going to get sealed up. They're going to build that wall, right? And the West is going to have to figure out this rump state that's going to be formed is going to have to figure out what it wants to be. And if the EU is ready to build a new nation, a peaceful nation there, or if they're not going to be able to build a peaceful nation there, then what do you do with all of these far right elements and these Azov guys and these criminals that are now armed to the teeth with all of these guns and weapons provided by EU countries? I hope everything made sense. And it is making sense to me now. It's making sense to me, the strategy. And it's important that we understand the strategy. Once again, whatever position you take on this conflict, whatever position, it is important to try and understand the strategy that's being implemented. And I believe that a lot of people in the West, especially on the mainstream media and even independent content creators, haven't quite understood what the strategy is. But I think that everyone that's watching this video or has been following the Duran and Alexander, I think we all understand now what is taking place. I think we have a very clear understanding what is taking place. Zelensky is a puppet, everybody. He's a freaking puppet. He's getting orders from an oligarch and Nuland and these people in the United States, Blinken, Nuland, and these neocons. He's a freaking puppet, an actor who's in way over his head, and the Russians understood this as well. The Russians understand this. They understood it, and they understand this, and they're executing their strategy now. And who knows what'll happen to Zelensky? Maybe he'll be shipped off to the West as well. Maybe not. I don't know.